good afternoon. Thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Alyssa Doroff. I'm the cyber technical leader here at NFP. I'm really excited to have Jen Coughlin and Carolyn Ryan from the law firm of Mullen Coughlin here with me today. You're going to walk us through a step-by-step guide of what to do, and most importantly, what not to do when your company is hit with a ransomware attack. Jen Coughlin is a founding partner of Mullen Coughlin LLC, a law firm solely dedicated to counseling organizations in the context of data privacy and cybersecurity. In her role serving as a data breach coach, Jen services organizations of all sizes and from every industry sector in first-party breach response and third-party privacy defense. In addition, she provides organizations with regulatory compliance services, pre-breach incident response planning services such as policy and procedure preparation, tabletop exercise, and employee training. Carolyn Purwin Ryan is a partner at Mullen Coughlin and serves as a data breach coach for organizations who have been hit or the victim of a real or attempted cybersecurity attack. Her practice includes leading investigations into cyber attacks, providing guidance on governmental or other third-party investigations, and assisting in data restoration and mitigating future attacks. Carolyn also counsels clients on the development of risk assessment policies, vendor agreement analysis, and implementation of data privacy practices. For those of you who may not know Mullen Coughlin, they are a law firm that exclusively is dedicated to counseling organizations in the context of data privacy and cybersecurity. With its unmatched knowledge of privacy and security laws and unparalleled experience in handling thousands of data privacy events and hundreds of resulting third-party actions, Mullen Coughlin services organizations of all sizes, in all industry sectors, and from every geographic footprint, in incident response, regulatory investigation, single plaintiff and class action litigation, and data privacy compliance. I personally have had the pleasure of working with the attorneys at Mullen Coughlin over the last 15 years throughout my tenure in the cyber insurance industry and can personally speak to their incredible responsiveness and efficacy, most importantly in the last 6 months and even the last month in the wake of the cyber attacks that many of my colleagues have seen and are aware of. Before we get started, just a quick note on logistics. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box and we'll answer them as they become relevant throughout the presentation or at the end. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jen and Carolyn to get started.
Great. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. It's Jennifer Coughlin. Again, I'm joined by Carolyn Purwin Ryan. We are two of the attorneys at the law firm of Mullen Coughlin. And thank you for joining us today. We are going to lead a discussion on the do's and don'ts of ransomware incident response, focused on the following three topics that are on your screen right now: threats and trends in the cyberspace, the anatomy of a ransomware incident response, and pre-incident and post-incident best practices. And we hope that this presentation gives you an understanding of these important topics, because if you know what to do, you will also potentially know what not to do. And another takeaway that I want everybody to leave with is that this is not a discussion that ends here. This is not something that you think about today and never think about again until you have an event. Ransomware incident response and incident response in general is constantly evolving, and therefore you must continue to think about it and its potential impact on your business and how your business will respond all the time. This is a risk that is constantly changing and is not going away. So with that in mind, we are going to turn into a discussion on our first agenda item, which is threats and trends. And I will turn the presentation over to Carolyn at this time.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. So this is a list of, what are the common threats? What are the ones that keep us up at night? How does this all happen? We get this question actually asked a lot, and understanding how these threat actors actually get into an environment is critical. Understanding how to combat this whole entire situation. So ransomware, that's malicious software. It's infecting the computer, displays a demanding a fee to be paid in order for your systems to work again. It's a criminal money-making scheme, right? That can be installed through deceptive links in an email message, instant message on a website, and it basically has the ability to lock a computer screen or encrypt important determined files with a password. So what are we talking about here? What are some of the things that we need to be thinking about, and what are the certain things that we've been seeing in terms of trend? Malicious attacks, the hackers in the networks themselves. What is one of the first things that I think about, especially within the past year themselves, is remote desktop protocols. That is one of the single foremost ones that, given the fact that we've had to expand the number of users working remotely, this has been a consistent trend basically in our investigations from basically 2018, but specifically within the past year or so, as we've had a lot more remote workers. Remote desktop protocols basically allows users to remotely connect to other Windows-based devices or networks. It's a commonly used IT service providers or remote desktop in order to get into the system, right? So, but implementing remote desktop protocols without adequate controls can basically leave your systems open for attack. So, what are we talking about here? What are some of the things that what not to do here? Um, Weak passwords, unrestricted internet access, not using virtual private networks, not using VPNs, unlimited authentication attempts. That's something I've seen as of late. And also using outdated remote desktop protocols. This can all leave the windows open for threat actors to get in. Remote workers, given the fact that we've had this trend, especially with COVID, with these remote workers having to go from home, another thing that we've seen is also we've had a lot of small to medium sized businesses that have had to be in a situation where they've kind of done security protocols that have left things in a situation where it might not be in a budget in order to have the best security protocols in place. So we've had to do unruns around security, leaving things more open to the internet and allowing attackers to get in there. So, in addition to which, we've noticed on here some additional threats. Just for your reference, not only just necessarily having to do with ransomware attacks, but this goes across the board. Malware and viruses themselves, but phishing. I mean, this is something they've become so sophisticated in terms of phishing attempts. I will say this: employees are kind of the gatekeepers when it comes to these situations. They need to know what this is. They need to know what to watch out for. These threat actor groups have become very sophisticated. During COVID themselves, we've seen ones where we've had human resources departments where we have employees that say, "Oh, I got an email from human resources and it attached a Word file that talked about my COVID tracking." We've seen emails associated with that. We've seen ones where it says, "Oh, this is from the finance department," and and attachments to it have been malware associated with it. Had a lot of links for people, given the fact that we have a lot of remote workers that are out there, ones that are encouraging people to click on a link and to re-enter in credentials. And a lot of people in terms of remote settings think to themselves, "Oh, okay, you know what? I must have just re-entered in my credentials incorrectly," and they click on the link and re-enter their credentials and give these threat actor groups access to their additional credentials. And why is this important? Why do we care about getting credentials? Well, credentials are kind of the gate key into different parts of the environment, right? Legit credentials, meaning usernames and passwords, or some of the best tools for a conspicuous access to a system through these threat actor groups. It also can lead to some of these threat actor groups using those credentials and escalating privileges, meaning that a user who necessarily might not have access to the keys to the kingdom might been able to manipulate and give themselves administrative privileges, which we have seen in a lot of instances where then they're able to then move laterally throughout the environment and install tools within the environment. So obviously, another thing that we've seen out there, we've seen, physical theft of hardware and paper as well. Employees, we certainly see those rogue employees that are out there, negligent use and storage of data, and also failure to learn the policies associated with it. One of the things that I will say is this: like we talk about employees a lot being the first line of defense. I would say, the top three things that we're seeing in terms of ransomware events and how these bad actors get in there. We're talking about, weak passwords, things that are out there where you have a situation where maybe they don't have multi-factor authentication, or they haven't changed their password in 60 to 90 days. They don't have those protocols and things like that put in place. Phishing attempts are another one, and then the third one will definitely have to be that remote desktop protocol. Those are the top three things that we have seen the most of. In terms of other employee things along the lines of that nature, we have definitely seen unencrypted emails being sent to the wrong participants, wrong emails, wrong recipients across the board. That does tend to happen, but I think what we want to be focusing on is these last two that we have been seeing a lot more as of late. Things that we want to be thinking about in terms of do's and don'ts for some of your insureds that we want to be making sure that they're aware of. Who are your business partners? Who do you share data with? Who are people who have access to your system? A lot of companies, when we have an incident that occurs, that's one of the first things that we ask. Not only just who has access, are you guys accessing your system, but who else is accessing your system? Who within the environment can have access to your system? Are we talking about your vendors? What are their obligations to you? Do they have certain protocols and things like that in place? Is it a situation where, let's just say, you had a vendor who you worked with for a number of years? What are we call them removal of legacy protocols? I had a situation last week where we had a, a ransomware incident that occurred, where we did find that it was based on credentials that were compromised. And taking a look at the credentials, it was based on a vendor that had access to the system a number of years ago. So when I say talk about legacy protocols, remove old usernames and email addresses, things to along that nature, because it gives the threat actors, we don't know who's using the same username and password across the board. We don't know what these vendors are doing. And certainly putting those protocols in place for anybody who's being accessing your system is certainly on the do list, but also on the don't negate everything in terms of you certainly want to put yourself in a position in terms of any sort of legacy protocols, anything in terms of your vendors, know exactly who's accessing your system, and certainly have management of it to the point where you know exactly what their protocols in terms of accessing your system in place. In addition to which, the supply chain, the event that's impacting, critical applications and software. I mean, in my opinion, I think that this is something that's going to, continue. I mean, anybody on the line here today, if I say the words SolarWinds and Microsoft at this point, probably wants to cringe and crawl underneath their desk. I think these large scale attacks on applications and software used by these threat actor groups, to think about it, it's just more more bang for your buck. I mean, the Microsoft vulnerability left open doors, and we've seen situations, especially within the past couple of weeks, where okay, Microsoft said to everyone, all right, well, we patch up your systems, but what happened here? There was a number of different clients, a lot of different companies across the board that left their doors open and vulnerable. And in the event that they're not patched, we have seen situations where that there's been data that was accessed or exfiltrated. So far it has been, a lot more of the automated bots and dropping, web shells and things along the lines of that nature. But it's certainly something that, as time and has gone forward, we are certainly seeing more so and more of. In terms of other applications, back in November of last year, the Bleeping Computer published an article saying that someone had alleged to steal and leak source codes for a popular exploitation framework called Cobalt Strike, right? So that is one of the programs that was actually utilized by different technicians on a good basis. Now, in terms of Cobalt Strike, that's something that's utilized. It's almost like a beacon to comb home. And one of the things that we see on these threat actor systems, that in the event we see it, it's one of our red flags that say, okay, well, there's potential where we have data access or exfiltration within the environment. So I think not only just we see ourselves, we see the SolarWinds, we see the Microsofts, but I think we're going to see some of these, tools and things along the lines of that nature. Like for instance, Cobalt Strike evades a large majority of antivirus tools products and EDR solutions that some of the insureds have in place. Those are the kinds of things that I think are going to continue to happen. I think it's going to continue to happen on a large scale. And I think it's also going to be things that are going to be evading some of the normal antivirus tools. And we're going to have a situation where you're, moving laterally throughout an environment, establishing persistence, harvesting credentials, and certainly, unfortunately, exfiltrating data is a lot of what we are continue to see. In addition to which, and I was just talking about the business partners themselves, just in terms of a situation that had happened to me. Knowing your business partners that you're working with, make sure that their passwords are definitely ones that have either multi-factor authentication. I did have one. One of the largest things that we also have seen as of late are managed service providers that continue to attack. We had a situation a couple months ago, where a managed service provider was attacked, and that's how they were able to gain access to certain systems within one of the insurance environments. And then once we had done the forensic process of it, we did learn that the managed service provider utilized a password within the environment to access the insurance systems, and the password was password, meaning that they used instead of the O in password, they used a zero. That is a true story. So certainly something that we want to be thinking about, and certainly something to keep insureds aware of it as time is going forward.
And Carolyn, before I advance it to the next slide, I want to note that on your screen right now are several different types of attack trends that we're seeing, but they don't always happen in isolation. So you can have a ransomware plus event. You can have a business email compromise plus event. And when you're thinking about ransomware, remember, it is not just a simple infection in your system. There is an intruder that is gaining access to your information system. That intruder is snooping around your system to get the lay of the land, to understand how you are structured and how they can quickly deploy ransomware across your environment and cripple the operations of your system. They are looking for sensitive data that, if it was subject to publication, would cause reputational harm for you and your employees and your clients. And they are sometimes exfiltrating this data before they encrypt your system with ransomware. That is going to prohibit your access to the information on your systems. They will then extort you. Sometimes it's just extortion for payment in exchange for the decryption key so that you can regain access to your information. Other times it's extortion for the encryption key plus a promise from the threat actors that they will not publish data that they took from your system. That's called doxing, where they're taking data from your system and then they're threatening to release it if you don't pay them. And we are seeing many more cases involved the exfiltration of data that is sensitive, and organizations being put in a tough spot of deciding, do we choose to protect our reputation and pay, or do we let this information be released and deal with the reputational harm that may occur as a result of the data being published?
Absolutely. And Jen, that brings up my next point where, when we're talking, what are we talking about when we're talking about ransomware payments? I kind of look at it as companies fall into one of three buckets, right? When you're deciding, when you're in a situation where you've been infected with ransomware, and, why do we pay? I get, Jen gets asked that question a lot. I'm sure you guys get asked that question a lot. Why would anybody decide to pay? Number one, it's, where you don't have a choice, where you're locked out, your backups are encrypted, and you literally are left with no options but to engage with these particular threat actors. The second bucket is from a business perspective. So, you take a look at it, and it would cost more to be down, or it would cost more to remediate and rebuild. The third becomes that business decision that Jen was kind of talking about, where these threat actors are getting to a point where they have stolen data, they've threatened to publish it, and we are in a situation where, okay, well, what kind of data are we talking about? Would this ruin my business? Would this ruin my reputation? Do I not have a choice? Now, one of the things that we will say about this is, is there that honor amongst thieves, right? We have seen, and certainly and definitely, we know what is being shown here in terms of the covert trend associated with it. We have seen in this double extortion, or this, doxing, where they're saying not only are they just locking you out of system, but extorting you for cash. We have seen the situation where, these particular threat actor groups, they're asking for a lot more money. That's been happening a lot more lately. But what's to say what they're going to do with the data? The data might not be, credibly destroyed. I mean, what are the 5 things that we usually necessarily ask for when negotiating with these particular threat actor groups? We ask for the decryptor tool. We ask that, the data be destroyed, and to show us. A lot of the times they'll either say, yeah, we deleted it, or they'll show us a video deleting it. But what's to say that they're in a situation where they're actually going to do that? Who's to say that they're not going to sell it to the person down the road? The other piece of what we ask for, give us back the information that we have. Some of the threat actors groups will give us a file tree that will show exactly what they took. Some of the threat actor groups have returned some of the data. Then we also ask how they got in there. Again, take that with a grain of salt, hence the reason for, utilizing forensics, but it's certainly something that some of them boast. Some of them say, oh yeah, that's how, we got in here through an open RDP, or, it was compromised credentials, or, things along the lines of that nature. But those are the kinds of things that, when we think about and we balance this out, there's nothing to say that we when we ask for the information back, or we say to them, hey, delete all of this, there's nothing to say that they don't go and go sell it to the buddy and one of the other threat actor groups down the road. So that's certainly something to be thinking about. And as we're leveraging this data exfiltration as a tactic, certainly all the things that we want to be balancing. It's not like something where it's like a settlement agreement or an NDA, like where we all sign off and parties in their best interest. It's not like a normal litigation, that kind of a thing. And also this also doesn't negate your obligation to notify. If there's personal identifiable information or health information that's involved, the cost of credit monitoring and notification is significantly less a lot of the times than and paying these threat actor groups. And you're going to have to do that in addition to it. So we continue to also see these threat actor groups being having additional, very aggressive tactics when it comes to these, to negotiating with insureds. Like, for instance, let's just say you are in that third bucket where you don't have to negotiate with the threat actor groups, and you're in a situation where you don't have to get the decryptor tool. Great. Well, we have seen, especially as of late, tactics such as calling the COO of the company, the threat actor groups calling the COO and saying, "Hey, look, we've got your data." They also sometimes call their customer service line and threaten some of their other employees. We have seen them email. We have also seen them, like, for instance, in cases where we have a ransomware event where they've actually called the clients. If, let's just say, we don't decide to engage, I know that some of the things that we have seen in the news as of late, and things that we have experienced as well, where these threat actor groups are also reaching out to the insured's clients of the data to try to also put them into a situation where they're forcing them and try to threaten them into paying as well. So in terms of what the ransomware itself, and certainly the things that we are seeing, the percentage of ransomware attacks, obviously continues. These threat actor groups are continue to release stolen data. That has increased, certainly. But the ransomware groups continue to leverage this data exfiltration tactic. However, the trust that the stolen data is going to be deleted is actually going down. So the defaults are becoming more and more frequent when exfiltrated data is kind of made public, despite the victim that's paying. So fewer companies are kind of giving into the cyber extortion and are able to recover from backups. Hence, as you're seeing some of the analytics from COVOR that's been provided, that the ransom payment itself has decreased. It's not necessarily that the demands have increased, but that the payments themselves have increased because people are in more of a position, which we're hoping is a continued trend. As also, more companies fall victim when these kind of situations occur too. We wanted to include one of the things that are out there. What we are, one of the things I was talking about is that second bucket is the downtime associated with it. Downtime, it seems to be, and the business interruption cost is one of the most costly aspects of ransomware attacks. And, we're seeing, in terms of the Q4 and the analytics that we have seen so far, we're seeing that the average company is down about 21 days, 2 more days that was previously reported within the past quarter. So this can range on a large spectrum, having that, the business be at a total standstill or mildly affected. But these costs, we're going to expect them to continue to get larger. One of the things that I would like to stress is that, especially from the beginning standpoint, is to involve a good and expert remediation team from the beginning. The reason why is because a lot of the organizations are not prepared for a situation in terms of this, like any sort of ransomware situation or anything along the lines of this nature, because a lot of the IT companies that we've had to deal with in terms of the on the ground are in a situation where they know how to deal with systems, but not in terms of rebuilding systems. And sometimes the first inclination is, let's pull everything offline, let's wipe everything clean and rebuild from scratch. Well, that could take a very long time, and also you could be wiping away forensic data. But it's also you're going to be losing. Sometimes the rebuild process itself doesn't have to go that way. We want to certainly make sure that the systems are clean. even if a system is reimaged, doesn't necessarily mean that it's necessarily clean. But even getting like legacy applications, things along the lines of that nature, software, that's where we've seen a large increase in terms of costs associated with it. Is just the rebuilding process, the business interruption being down. And we expect that to continue as this process, as ransomware continues to evolve. Jen? I know you wanted to talk about how this all goes, how it goes down.
Yeah, so we are going to go through a discussion on the anatomy of a ransomware incident response. But first, we're going to discuss who the players are. So there's several players that can participate in a ransomware incident response process. The first being the insured organization, the victim organization. And we oftentimes see organizations not designate the right people for their incident response team. So who should be on the incident response team? It's going to be IT. It's going to be the technical team that will likely be the first people to hear that something may be happening on the organization system. It's going to be risk management because you want to ensure you are complying with the insurance policy that you've purchased to shift the risk associated with responding to a ransomware event. You are also going to want legal involved because legal is going to appreciate the legal and regulatory framework applicable to the organization and laws and contracts that may be in place that will require the organization to take certain steps within certain periods of time. You may also see other members of the organization participate, such as HR or marketing, but we always encourage organizations to ensure that you have the tripod, you have risk management, legal, and IT involved in the incident response process from the very beginning, and make sure that the organization is trained to alert the right people to suspicious activity as soon as possible so that the incident response team can launch into action and take the steps appropriate to respond to the event. Another player, your broker who has ensured that you have purchased coverage that's going to cover costs associated with the incident response process. You want them to get involved as quickly as possible. Same for the insurance carrier. The broker is going to work with your insurance carrier to make sure the carrier has what they need to open the claim, to make sure any coverage questions that may exist are discussed in a timely fashion, and make sure that the insured is getting from the carrier what they purchased when they purchased the cyber insurance policy. Now, you can have cyber insurance involved, but we also sometimes see K&R involved because you may have coverage for a ransom payment there that you can tap into when you are dealing with a ransomware event. We also sometimes see property policies involved that can cover some costs related to restoration efforts. And there's a concept of silent cyber in the insurance industry, which, Alyssa, I'm sure you can do an entire session on that. But you want to make sure that you understand before you have an event who your carrier is, who your broker is, what coverage you have purchased, and what is required by you under the policy in order to tap into that coverage. Another player, Breach Coach Law Firm, that is us. And our role is to be your counsel and assist you in investigating and responding to the data privacy events, getting the right people involved from the get-go to assist in the response process. And one of the big don'ts of the ransomware incident response process, and this applies to incident response in general, is not working with outside counsel, but also not working with outside counsel that understands the incident response process. We have taken matters over from other firms that may provide transactional guidance to the organization or other type of guidance and counsel to the organization that is wholly unrelated to cyber and data privacy and incident response. And we take the matter over, and there is a lot of cleanup that we have to do while we're also in the heat of the moment of responding to the ransomware event. So understand under your insurance policy who your designated breach coach law firm is. Even better, understand when you call the number that is provided to you by your broker or your carrier to report to the carrier that you had an event, confirm who's answering that call, because it's a possibility that it's Mullen Coughlin and you are speaking to the breach coach law firm from the outset. And that's great because we are going to be able to direct you to take the steps necessary to appropriately respond to the ransomware event. Another player, forensic investigation firm. Not any forensic investigation firm. You are going to want to work with a firm under privilege, so this firm is engaged by counsel, with a firm that has experience responding to ransomware events and is also approved by your cyber insurance carrier. So where do we see organizations going wrong? Engaging forensic firms prior to a ransomware event by a two-party agreement to respond to an event should an event occur. There is no privilege that will apply to that, no matter how hard we try to back it into a three-party agreement where we can assert privilege over it. There will always be challenges that we may not be able to overcome relating to the privilege applicable to their work, to their findings. We see organizations, even after an event happens, reaching out to a forensic firm, engaging them directly, having them come in. And the forensic investigation firm may not be somebody that truly appreciates. There's two goals here. The goal is to get you operational as quickly as possible, but the goal is also to understand exactly what happened, the scope of the event, how it happened, whether or not it's still happening, is it ongoing, what information may be at risk as a result of the event, and what holes are in existence in the environment that needs to plug to stop something like this from happening again. So we see organizations calling a firm that they may have worked with on penetration testing or some other type of service, or they've never worked with before, but they Googled ransomware and see that there's an incident response firm in their town and they call them. They aren't going to appreciate the need for taking certain steps in the incident response process, and chances are you may not be able to get coverage for their fees under the cyber insurance policy because the cyber insurance company has done the dirty work of identifying who's really good at this and also negotiated preferred rates for you to use them. And that firm is also not going to be covered under privilege because the attorneys did not engage them. So cryptocurrency broker is another party to the ransomware incident response process. There are some forensic investigation firms that have the cryptocurrency piece in-house, have the negotiation with the threat actor and the payment of the threat actor, approving we confirm OFAC compliance in-house, and you don't need a third party to do that. But there are other forensic firms that have the cryptocurrency broker as a subcontractor on their agreement. And again, the role of the broker is to negotiate and or make the payment to the threat actor, conducting the appropriate sanctions check to make sure we are not paying an organization that is sanctioned or has a sanctioned nexus. Player number 7, restoration firm. Sometimes they're not needed because the forensic investigation firm may have resources in the house, or the organization may have enough resources that they can work on restoration in-house. The restoration firm is going to come in and assist sometimes in gathering the artifacts needed for the forensic investigation, sometimes restoring from backups, sometimes utilizing the decryption key if we do purchase it from the threat actor to restore access to the data, and then dealing with all the bad things that can happen during the ransomware response process, because you have to remember, you don't pay the ransom, get the key, input the key into your system, and it magically goes back to the environment state immediately prior to the ransomware infection. There's corruption of data that happens when the encryption algorithm is running through your system. And there's going to be some manual efforts and programmatic efforts that need to be undertaken to clean the data up and clean the environment up. Public relations. So the public relations firm will be an organization that assists you in crafting responses for internal and external audiences. And again, similar to the forensic investigation firm, similar to the restoration firm and the cryptocurrency broker, if not a subcontractor to the forensic investigation firm. The breach coach is the one that engages the public relations firm, and the public relations firm will be on the carrier's approved panel. We oftentimes see organizations go astray here by working with somebody that they already have on retainer, so we're going to have privilege challenges there, but also working with somebody that is more focused on marketing. And there's a difference between marketing and public relations. Marketing is doing what you can to get people to talk about you and your story. Public relations is working on doing what you can to make sure people don't talk about you and don't talk about your story and focus on another juicy story and just move on. Don't pay attention to what happened at your organization. Letter printing and mailing, call center, and credit and identity monitoring services. So these players are not always involved in a ransomware incident response process, because you can have a ransomware event where you do not have any disclosure obligations. You don't need to tell anybody about the event. So therefore, you're not mailing letters, you're not operating a call center, and you're not offering credit and identity monitoring restoration services. But like I said earlier, threat actors have gotten hip to the fact that it is more likely they will be paid if they take data from your system and threaten to shame you by publicizing that data. And the data that they take is oftentimes extremely sensitive, the types of data that a victim organization will not want to be made public. So oftentimes that information includes information that's protected under law or contracts that will result in the imposition of disclosure obligations on the victim organization. So you will see a letter printing and mailing vendor, a call center vendor, and a credit and identity monitoring vendor involved in the ransomware incident response process under those circumstances. Carolyn, do you want to add anything before I advance to the next slide? All right. So this slide addresses the potential roadmap in the ransomware incident response process. And I'm going to pull up all the milestones because I want you to appreciate them all at once and appreciate the fact that sometimes the roadmap lays out like this. So the milestones on the screen don't always happen in this sequence, but it will always happen with detection. And you have to remember what Carolyn said earlier. Sometimes the ransomware event is on your system and you will likely detect it when you start receiving calls from your staff that they can't access their information or sign in via remote capability. Other times the ransomware event happens on a system housed by a vendor of yours, a third party with which you have a relationship. You may not have the ability to detect the encryption of their information system from your vantage point. You may detect it and suspect it when you are reaching out to your vendor and asking for information and they're saying that they're experiencing a disruption in the operation of their information systems. I will tell you that likely means that they are experiencing a ransomware event and they have taken their systems offline. So you want to make sure, and we oftentimes see organizations go astray here, that the third parties that you work with that house your data, your contracts must be written in such a way so that you learn about an event potentially compromising the security of your information stored on their systems as soon as possible. Not wait until they determine that it definitely impacted the security of your data. Tell them under the contract and get them to agree to, under the contracts, tell you when there is a potential for the compromise in the security of your information. And a ransomware infection on a system that houses your data does present a potential for a compromise in the security of your information. And the reason you need to know that is because you want to make sure that they're taking the appropriate steps to investigate and respond to the event, and also understand legally and contractually what obligations you have as a result of the event. You can shift under contracts to the organization that houses your data that if they have an event that compromises the security of your data, they are going to be the ones sending the letters out to impacted individuals, notifying regulatory agencies, notifying other third parties. Except the legal obligation, regardless of what the contract says, stays with you as the owner of the data. So you want to make sure they're doing everything to confirm the nature and scope of the event that they should, appreciating exactly what your legal and contractual obligations are, ensuring that they fulfill them, but also controlling the message about the event. This is a story that individuals that trusted you with their information, and the information ended up on the vendor system, this story is going to individuals that have a relationship with you. You want to make sure that they are hearing an accurate story, a consistent story, and appreciate what questions they may ask of you as a result of the event. So you have detection. What happens next? Mobilization of the incident response team. And we see organizations go astray when, like I said earlier, they have the wrong people involved. They don't have the right members, the right stakeholders of the organization on the incident response team. You need to identify who those stakeholders are, who the members are of the team now, and their backups, because people do take vacations, people do go out on leave, people do get sick. Make sure you identify who those individuals are, make sure they know that they're on the team, and make sure they're trained to mobilize the way that they should and launch the incident response process the way that they should. And also make sure they appreciate how to communicate with each other, because if you have a ransomware event, your email may be down or it may be operational, but it may not be secure. You may have a business email compromise. So you want to set up a communication channel prior to an event between the incident response team that they can leverage immediately when they have to mobilize, and in a fashion that is secure so that the threat actors are not intercepting messages and reading messages and seeing the playbook for the incident response process. The next step, engagement of the breach coach. I can't say this enough. You want to get the breach coach in as soon as possible. And we tell organizations all the time when they say, well, when should we call? What extent of investigation should we do before we call you? Call us as soon as possible. Number one, the call's free. We're not going to charge you. You're going to get free legal advice. And there are times where we are going to be able to tell you on that call, you've done what you need to do. You don't have anything to worry about. call us when you have another event. We can talk about that one too. Or you call us and we say, we got to get involved. We got to get forensics in. We got to take other certain steps. Get us involved as quickly as possible. We will be able to engage the right organizations to assist in the incident response process, best protect to the extent possible their services in privilege, and also ensure that we're working with firms that are approved by the carrier, making sure the carrier is aware of what's happening so that any coverage questions you have can be answered in real time, not after the fact when you've incurred cost and the carrier may say, well, there may not be coverage for that. So almost hand in hand in a ransomware incident response process, we're being engaged and then we're engaging the forensic investigation firm. Because again, you may be bleeding at the time that you call us. We do not know that your environment is secure. We need to get the right people in right away to confirm, is your environment secure? Are they out of the system? What did they do? What information did they take? Everything that we need to know to provide legal guidance to you on what your obligations are as a result of the event. And when you bring in the wrong people or they're focused on the wrong things, it's going to impact our ability to potentially cloak it in privilege, but also get you to a position where it's defensible, it's reasonable to conclude that you don't have to tell anybody about this event and the incident response process that you undertook is appropriate under the circumstances. Now, in a ransomware event, we are always going to be focused on, do you have backups from which you can restore? And the threat actors have gotten savvy. They snoop around for the backups on your system and try and take them down because they know organizations are less likely to pay the ransom if they have backups from which they can restore. So we need to understand, do we need to even entertain the idea of purchasing the decryption key from the attacker? Do we know what data they took? And also threat intel on the threat actors behind that variant. Do they operate a shame blog? Do they sell information to other criminal organizations? Because that's going to guide your decision in determining whether or not payment should be made. And if payment is made, I want to emphasize this as well. We see organizations go astray by utilizing firms to make the payment or going out on the exchange themselves and securing cryptocurrency and transferring it to the threat actor's wallet without first reporting it to law enforcement and also ensuring they are not paying a sanctioned entity. So October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and October 2020 was happening when it came to cybersecurity. On the first of the month, the OFAC issued a guidance on steps that organizations should be taking prior to making payments in a ransomware event. And they speak about mitigating factors they will consider if there is an enforcement action that they pursue against an organization after payment is made for violations. And there's strict liability that attaches to that. But one of the mitigating factors that OFAC will consider is self-reporting and timely reporting to law enforcement in cooperation with law enforcement's investigation. And working with the right breach coach will ensure you have access to the right members of law enforcement, to all the members on the FBI ransomware task force. We have their cell phone numbers. We pick up the phone, we call them, we get them threat intel. We want to understand from their perspective, what should we be thinking about and what should we be doing that we aren't thinking about and doing already? And we see firms not taking this step and exposing organizations that have already been victimized by a ransomware infection to potential liability down the road for fines and penalties because they failed to ensure that payment was not being made to a sanctioned organization. Restoration, backup versus key. Again, this is something that we're talking about on day one, call one with you. Do we need to get the key? Do we have backups from which we can restore? What kind of resources does the organization have to utilize in the restoration process? Forensics, do you have it in-house or do we need to bring in another third party to assist in that process? And you don't want to dilly-dally around this. You want to start the restoration efforts as soon as you possibly can. You don't want to be crippled. You want to be functioning. You want to be operational. So we are, again, addressing this on day one. Do not wait until you have gone a few days through the forensic investigation. Talk to the threat actor. You want to understand and put into place a restoration plan day one, second one. Engagement of PR firm, we talked about that. Sometimes the engagement of the public relations firm happens at the same time the forensic investigation firm is engaged because you may already be out in the media. You may have employees that are posting on Facebook, oh, I guess I'm just gonna lay on my couch all day since ABC company was infected with ransomware and I can't gain access to my system. Real life story that has happened. You want to revisit your social media policy in your handbook and ensure that when you are communicating with internal stakeholders, including your employees, You want them to appreciate the sensitivity around this event and the need to keep its existence and the response confidential, but also appreciate what media outlets may be asking questions about the event and catch wind of the event, and prepare holding statements, prepare talking points, train your staff on how to respond to inquiries and making sure that the message is consistent and accurate every single time. And the escalation process when somebody is just not pleased with the response that they're getting. Again, the engagement of nailing call center and credit monitoring providers. I talked about that a little while ago. You don't need that all the time, but sometimes you do in ransomware events when they take data or they're in your system. I've had events where they've been in the system for 3 months. They've exfiltrated 3 terabytes of data. They looked at 1 terabyte of data. You have to mine that data to understand what's in there. And the forensic investigation firm is going to have internal resources or work with the vendor to assist in that process to confirm what information may be at risk as a result of the event. And disclosures as required by law, contract, or courtesy. So again, day one, second one of the things we will try to appreciate is what legal and regulatory framework is your organization held to? And have you had any events before? Because something that may have happened before may shape the incident response process. And even though under law and under contract, you may not have an obligation to disclose it, as a courtesy, you may decide because of a previous event or because of the circumstances of this event, you want to do a courtesy notice to certain stakeholders, certain internal and external audiences. Can include law enforcement. And again, we are calling law enforcement as soon as we are engaged. We want to make sure that if there is any type of enforcement action pursued down the road, we are able to say we reported to law enforcement. At the very beginning, we cooperated with them. But you're also going to have individuals, which could be employees or other third parties that are connected to your business, regulators, state regulators, federal regulators, consumer reporting agencies as well, media and other business partners that you need to notify about the event or have holding statements to communicate about to utilize when you're communicating about the event. And then litigation and claims. So I'd like to say that these only happen after disclosure goes out and these only happen if the disclosure occurs, but that's not the case. You can have a claim asserted against your organization from the second your business goes down and you can't support one of your business partners. You can have a claim from an employee in the very beginning of a matter because they think that their information is at risk and you are responding inappropriately and they're going to assert a claim against you. So again, on the screen is the potential roadmap for the ransomware incident response process. Understand the milestones on this slide. They don't always happen in every ransomware incident response process, and they don't always happen in this order, but it is something that you need to appreciate as you're moving forward and preparing for responding to a ransomware event that may impact your organization or your organization's data. All right, Carolyn, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, here are some other best practices, things to be thinking about in order for to be putting yourself in the best position, right? What can we do to prepare? This list is a pretty comprehensive list of the things that you can do prior to any incident occurring, just to best arm yourself walking into here. One of the things that's not on this list that I do recommend is, when you talk about, purchasing cyber insurance from the bottom up, please print out any sort of plan that you have. I know a lot of things are stored in the cloud, stored in email. I always think to myself, if I lose my cell phone, it's like the end of the world, right? But certainly print it out. Print out the phone numbers of everybody, the key stakeholders that Jem is talking about. Print out the information. Have that incident response plan in place. Print it out ahead of time because it's not worth anything if it's stuck and encrypted on a system when these kind of situations occur. But another part is, and this would go into that incident response plan, is understanding what you have. How many servers do you have? How many endpoints do you have? Meaning, how many computers? Who has access to this information? What are the kind of crown jewels? Where is your personal identifiable information? Where is your employees health records, medical information, things like that? Because the thing is that as we're going through the forensic process and certainly having an understanding as to what potential data was accessed or exfiltrated by these potential threat actor groups, we want to have an understanding as to your entire server environment, but also where not only does that help from a forensics perspective, and not only does it help to have an understanding as to to what these potential threat actors took from the beginning, but also it's important to have an understanding in terms of your priority list of what you would want to have back up and running first. And that helps in the remediation process as well. Another important fact is understand your contractual obligations to secure data and report security incidences. I've seen this more and more as a trend as of late. Abiding by state and federal law obligations, and that's the breach coach's job to advise you as to any sort of state and federal law. But another thing that comes up a lot, especially as of late, is this contractual obligations that go beyond state and federal law. I've seen ones that require you to notify in the event of a suspected incident, meaning that we don't know what's occurring here. And some of them have very short time clocks. Some of them say 48 hours. Some of them say 24 hours. Some of them say within a couple of days, however that may be. And some of them also have more expansive definitions of what's considered personal identifiable information that goes beyond state and federal laws. So you certainly want to be aware of these kind of situations, especially in the event of an incident occurring. And you want to have, and it's not an excuse to say, oh, look, by the way, my contract's stuck up in the cloud. We certainly want to be cognizant of those situations. You want to have the phone numbers and email addresses of the people that you need to contact, and you want to be aware of them from moment one. That goes to the next point, which is in terms of understanding the legal and regulatory framework associated with it. Know kind of where you might want to fall in terms of what you might be regulated by, in addition to the state laws, but thinking about from the perspective of, are you in banking? Are you regulated by the SEC? FERPA has FERPA and Department of Education. Do you fall under there? Are you regulated by GLBA? Those are the kinds of things that the lawyers that are out there, the breach coaches that are out there, will certainly advise you as to. But it'd be certainly good for you as an organization to understand that as well, given the fact of you want to be prepared in the event. There's some states that are out there that have very quick notification obligations. Some say 72 hours. What if you're regulated by the insurance industry? Some of them have, you have to notify them within 2 business days, 3 business days. What about financial regs? Same thing in New York. They have the Department of Financial Services. They have very short windows associated with it. It's good to know about these things in advance, so then you can be prepared and certainly be ready to notify appropriately. Conducting security assessments of your systems, always very important to know, kind of taking a look under the hatch and playing a little bit of Monday morning quarterback before the incidents kind of happen, when these situations occur. But certainly know your vulnerabilities. And as I said before, train your employees. They are one of the first lines of defense that are out there. Let them know about these phishing attempts. Let them know that you would never ask for credentials for a secondary time. Change enable multi-factor authentication. Certainly make them aware to check email addresses before sending additional information. Don't click on links. And then, by the way, also create an incentive that in the event that they do, to let you know, because that's another situation. A lot of people think that, especially with employer-employee relationships, that they're going to get in trouble. You want to encourage them and to have employees be very much involved in the process and have an ownership as to the security of your systems as well. Patching vulnerabilities, certainly, Microsoft Exchange, everybody's seen the things like that are out there. These are going to continue down the road. We are going to continue to see some of these large-scale potential attacks that are out there. It's certainly something, as you're making sure that these patches come out, to apply the patches very, very quickly. Remove any sort of out-of-date software. Make sure that everything is up to date. Have to the extent that you can, have additional endpoint protections, additional firewall solutions that are across the board. Patch your VPNs, manage your passwords, and backups. I can't stress enough the importance of backups and having multiple copies of backups that are tested, but not only just in one place, right? Because you can have backups to the cloud, but make sure that you have backups potentially in different areas as well. Have one that potentially might be on premises, and house them maybe not connected to the systems as well, because we've seen the threat actors, what's the first thing that they try to do? Leave you in the worst situation possible. And we see certainly attacking the backups is one of the first steps in terms of a ransomware attack. So we want to make sure that you're leaving yourself in the best situation as possible. So if you can have ones and ones that are tested and consistently backed up. If you can have them in 3 locations, all the better. Incident response plans are worth nothing unless you test them. They're a constantly ever evolving situation. We have these threat actor groups that are out there where it's constantly evolving. They are trying different and new tactics all the time. So certainly you want to be keeping sure that your incident response plan is updated accordingly. People, come and go in terms of organization. So you want to make sure that that's something that we're all keeping in mind. And also to have a backup plan in the event you do go down. Come up with a plan B. Certainly have do that vendor management. Make sure that you know your contractual obligations to them and also the contractual obligations to yourself. I know that Jen had spoken about that earlier. One of the things I would certainly stress: know their obligations to you. Know in the event that they have an incident that they need to report to you right away, know that if in the event that they need to provide notifications to you, that you would have the ability to take a look at it, and also require that they have cyber insurance. Know that there are potential liabilities associated with it. Take a look at those indemnification clauses. Certainly something to be taking a look at it as going forward. And purchase cyber insurance. I can't begin to stress that enough. To give yourself in a situation, in terms of not having to pay out of pocket, things along the lines of that nature. So next slide, post incident, best practices, know who to get in touch with right away, mobilize your incident response team, have an incident response team ready to go, engage the counsel right away, work with your broker. They'll be the ones to direct you and certainly know in terms of notifications and get you in good hands right away. And make sure, as Jen said earlier, sometimes it's not an incident. Make sure that, before you go and message everyone and say we're down, or we say use the B word. Don't utilize the word breach until we know that it is, right? So certainly make sure that you have the appropriate messaging in place at all times. Make sure that you're consistent in that. And be aware of the deadlines and thresholds that we've been talking about here today, not only just in state and federal law, but contractual obligations as well. Jen?
Great, thank you. And we have 3 minutes, and we have one question that came in via chat. And the question is, how do you recommend to coordinate firms that are on retainer that are helping get back up in this new forensic investigation firm? So this is a great question, because one of the don'ts that we see, again, is utilizing having an incident response firm on retainer via a 2-party agreement prior to an event happening, and then utilizing that firm when you have an event and not bringing in counsel. So we have recommendations for organizations stuck in this position. So first things first, interview the firms that are on the cyber insurance panel that may be helping you in the incident response process before you have an event. Get a comfort level with them about their capacity, availability, expertise, and make a decision beforehand as to who you would like to work with. You can go as far as negotiating, but not executing the engagement material with them. And we do that with clients all the time. Before they have an event, we negotiate. We do not execute the engagement material between us, the organization, and the forensic investigation firm, so that when you have an incident, you already have the engagement material ironed out. All you need to do is stamp it and execute it. So have those interviews before you have an event and appreciate the role that the forensic investigation firm will serve, and also understand what the firms you already have on retainer are going to do. If they are filling a role that nobody else can fill and we need them to, we may recommend that we engage them via a separate MSA and SOW from the one that you have via 3-party, and we would take the position that we are directing their work. Again, it is not bulletproof when it comes to privilege, and our preference will be to bring somebody in that does not have a pre-existing relationship with you, that we would engage them under privilege and direct their work. But there have been times where that was the approach that we had to take. Again, it's not bulletproof. I would recommend understanding and getting familiar with the forensic firms you may work with during the incident response process, and being prepared to utilize them and only them in the response process, and not somebody that you already have on retainer.
That's great. Thank you, Jen and Carolyn. That was really fantastic, and I know really helpful for every company right now that's in the wake of these incidents, trying to figure out how best to be prepared, obviously, and what they should and should not be doing. So thank you again for doing this webinar today. As I mentioned earlier, Mullen Coughlin is a trusted partner for us, as well as nearly every cyber insurance carrier, if not all of them. If you or your company does not happen to have insurance and you're hit with an incident, please reach out to myself or your local NFP broker so we can pair you with an attorney at Mullen Coughlin at a discounted rate. So again, that concludes our webinar. I want to thank everybody for attending and just let everyone know that a recording of today's presentation will be available in 48 hours. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.